All right, we're live. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the first, I guess, inaugural live stream of the Raw podcast. I'm your co-host Adam, here with Kyle.
Hey, yo,
What's
so
up?
good to be here. And,
Absolutely.
we've been talking about this for a while. I'm glad we're finally able to stream together. And, after all this time that, you and I have been sharing thoughts on Twitter, conversations between each other, we decided that it's time to put our thoughts out there, put them out in the real world.
That's
And,
right.
yeah, excited to break down what we plan on covering, what this is all about, a little bit about ourselves, and we can kind of just kick off this inaugural episode setting expectations for what we're going to do moving forward. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. And for those who are wondering what RAW stands for, it is an acronym. It stands for Real Adoptee Words, which really sort of describes everything, right? Our goal is to be authentic, genuine, uncut, and we're both adoptees. And so I think that gives you an idea of basically where we're coming from, what this live stream series, which we'll try to release the audio of these live streams as audio podcasts as well. So look out for that coming to wherever you get your podcasts. And so we'll be trying to do that. So, it's about adoptees, it's about adoption. But we'll be talking about a lot of stuff. How you doing, Chris? And
Ooh,
our words, right? Our words, and we're gonna be just putting them out there.
absolutely. And when I think of raw, and I mean, like you said, real is an authentic, as in genuine. We're real adoptees,
That's
giving
right.
our
We're not
real
fake
opinions.
adoptees.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm gonna let Old Dirty Bastards sort of set the tone for what we want to do. So, we like it raw. So,
Right.
I'm excited. I got the soundboard going, so we'll be doing a
Want to
lot of
hit the
air
air
horns.
horn? Air horn.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean,
Absolutely.
we're a proper live stream. We got the soundboard and everything.
Exactly.
But I
So,
guess not. Not to play around too much. But Kyle, did you want to just like start with like who we are or give that sort of background?
yeah, absolutely. You can
At
add
least
on
for
to any
yourself.
details. I'm gonna speak for both of us. Then, if you have anything that you want to add personally, you can add on to that. But I think one reason why we wanted to do something together is that we are both Korean adoptees. We're both American, and we're both over the age of 30. And I think the last one is actually an important, probably overlooked sort of facet of ourselves because, like, since we spend or at least I spend a lot of time on Twitter these days. I mean, I feel like when I see a really shitty take or something that's really out of touch, it's usually from someone that's like 21 years old and hasn't experienced the real world. So I think the fact that we're Korean adoptees, we're American,
Yeah.
and we're this age is going to be part of the reason why our thoughts are things that we want to put out there. We've had enough experience in life where we've, done some shit, seen some things, and, we haven't really seen a perspective quite like ours yet, at least coming from Asian adoptees yet. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to just break it down with you. I guess from there, is there anything else that you'd like to add in terms of who we are or
No, I
any
mean
introductory details?
that's well said, man. And this is, I think, part of like where we're going to be coming from is that this is not like a beginner like live stream for people who are trying to what is an adoptee and sort of definitional sort of introductory type of thing. Certainly we will try to explain where we come from. Maybe if if it serves whatever topic we're talking about, we'll try to explain some things so that we're understood. But this is not like a series where we're doing the ABCs or the 101 of get to know an adoptee type of thing, right? This
Exactly.
is, at least for myself, I want to put out my opinions about various issues when it comes to adoption. Um, Politics, world news, that type of stuff. I'm not here to sort of be an explainer for stuff. So we're going to be intermediate to advanced in difficulty, if we want to put it in that context.
No, I think that's a great sort of next point that I would want to cover, or at least like several points, is what are our aspirations for this show? What do we want to do? What do we want to cover? What kind of tone do we want to have? And so I think that's probably the biggest one, is that I think a lot of podcasts done by Asian Americans or done by adoptees are for an audience that's not adopted, or for people that are sort of just sort of coming out of the haze, as what they say, among adoptees.
Well, the
But
fog, right? You'll see
yeah,
that. Yeah.
absolutely. So I feel like we want to do something a little bit different from the perspective of, you may not know everything about the history of adoption. You may not know everything about what's going on in Asian America, but we want to have a certain assumption of where your baseline level of knowledge is, so we can have a conversation where you actually learn something, or there's something insightful, or there's something profound, rather than it just being like a 101 explanation, as you said. So I mean, if you're really just beginning to grapple with this stuff, whether it be being adopted, or whether it be your identity as an Asian American, or grappling with the fact that you are a racialized person in the United States of America, this shit is not for you. I mean,
That's right.
we want to do this in a way where like we respect our audience. I mean, we're coming from like the fact that we're assuming that you come from similar sorts of experiences, either as an adopted person or as an Asian person, but we're not doing beginner shit. So, I mean, we're not going to try to make you care. We're going to assume that you think similar things to us, and we're going to unpack it, or we're going to elaborate on it and start new
Yeah.
conversations that you don't really see. So, I mean, with that, I would say we're not going to be covering stuff like, oh, I got called a slur, I got called a chink, or stereotypes
Right.
about just basic stereotypes. And I'm getting a call, but I'm just going to ignore that right now. And I'm also going to put my phone on silent as well. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to basic stuff, microaggressions, like the things that we sort of see on Twitter with commentary like such and such thing is problematic, we're not coming from that perspective. We want to do something that is assuming that, you're beyond this. You've experienced more than this, and you want conversation that's more than just that. So I guess that's addressing difficulty. I guess the second thing, aspirationally, that I think we want to do is be ourselves and be honest. I mean, I think there are a lot of adoptees and a lot of Asian Americans that think like us or have similar experiences. But at the same time, I feel like we're in a minority of Asian Americans, or we're a minority within adoptees in terms of what we think, even if they're things that a lot of people can relate to. So in that sense, I want to be not overly positive and not overly negative either. I think adoptees get an unfair rap for being, I guess, feeling hurt, or always talking about how bad adoption is. And, we definitely think that, but there's a little bit more nuance to it. And I think there's more
Yes.
than just sort of the navel gazing, woe is me sort of things that we can talk about. I mean, I think
Yeah.
all these good things and these bad things sort of set up the conversation for who we are as people, and then what we also want to talk about as well. And so we also do not want to self-censor. We want to just share
Yes.
exactly what we think. And even if it's not a popular opinion, just something that's based on our own experiences, just going through the world and learning lessons in life. I guess from there, Adam, I know we have a couple more. Anything that you want to touch?
No, man. I mean, you put it really well. Like, there's certainly things like topics and things that we're going to talk about. I think plan more in the future. This stream is more just about setting the table, right? As you said, just like what you were talking about, of what our aspirations are, sort of what we want to do in a general sense when we talk about something. But I think you put it really well. Like, and the only thing one thing I want to call attention to is we're going to try as much as possible to minimize self-censoring, right? Because I think that's something a lot of people do, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it happens too much, and people do it out of, I think, out of fear that they're going to get canceled or whatnot. But I don't think people necessarily, even if it's a quote unquote unpopular view, uh, have these like hugely monstrous opinions, right?
No,
Most of the
exactly.
time, you can say something that might be honest, and maybe it's a little bit unsophisticated, but or isn't perfectly worded, but it's not so bad that you have to worry that you're suddenly gonna lose all your friends or something like that. So I'm not necessarily worried. I'm not worried about that. I mean, honestly, the stuff that I've put out, already, I've done podcasts and things about the citizenship issue, which I think we'll probably touch on at some point,
Absolutely.
and talking about rehoming and all this stuff. Even just putting that out and talking about the facts of what happens in the world could be seen as controversial to people, right?
Absolutely.
It's like,
Especially if that truth is ugly.
yeah, exactly. Especially if the truth is ugly, right? If people don't want to hear that this stuff actually happens, and it's allowed to happen because we're just not we're not looking out for it, right? We don't want to protect the people that it happens to, right? So I want to try to be as honest and as unfiltered as we can be. Um, and I think also we're just going to talk about things maybe that we're interested in, and we'll talk about ourselves. I know that one of the topics we have on here, and I don't know if we're going to get into all of these little things, but
Sure.
sort of how maybe the events or things that define our lives. It could be adoption related. It could be just being related to being American, right, and being
Absolutely.
of a certain age or growing up in a certain environment. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things. I think some streams are just going to be maybe talking whatever topic interests us that day. But I'm really excited to talk about so many things with you. I know that we usually jive on stuff, but I'm hoping we can disagree too,
No,
which is
absolutely.
maybe a weird thing to say, but I think that makes for good conversation, right? Because I think we have a base level of respect for one another,
Absolutely.
and we're we're comfortable, or at least I'm comfortable disagreeing with you, and usually that's the way with my friends, right? Is that I feel comfortable disagreeing, knowing that we're still gonna be friends at the end of the day. So
Yep.
I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also just looking forward to interacting with anyone who does who does watch us. I think there are probably 1 or 2 people right now. Hopefully that number grows, but I'm hoping people comment and ask us questions, or put their own thoughts in there, and then we can react to them. Because
Absolutely.
the reason why we wanted to do a live stream was or in a video live stream, is that partly because I think everything's going to video, but also because a live stream really is interactive, and I do want to make sure that, and I find it fun to do that type of thing.
Absolutely. And I also think of this as like a conversation. I mean, obviously amongst ourselves, me and you, but also with the audience. So, I mean, as we're discovering things, learning things, reflecting on things, the audience can do the same thing. And that's the reason why I want to respect a certain level of like their experience or intelligence, just to make sure, hey, like these topics, they may have been tread before by many other podcasts that are much more talented and much more charismatic than us. But I think we still bring a unique enough perspective where it's worth having these conversations from different angles. So I'm really excited to see what kinds of audience participation we'll get, even if we're not like having 1,000 listeners in the
Yeah,
chat right now. It's just exciting to have people that can relate to us in some way and that are joining us for this first couple episodes anyway. So I'm really excited about that. And actually, one last thing, I'm just kind of I'm looking at our outline because
yeah.
we put some points down that we wanted to cover,
We're trying to
and
be
I
a
think
little organized here.
absolutely, we're not winging this completely. We're only winging it about 50%. But one final thing that I think we aspire to, and that what we want to do with this live stream, is something that I don't think either of us got as kids,
Okay.
um, which is model being Asian and adopted adults and being
Yeah.
unapologetic about it. Um,
Yeah.
because for both of us, we've already lived as white people. We obviously are not white, but the way that we were conditioned and the way that we were raised, I mean,
Yeah.
de facto white people. And we had to discover just through experiences in the world that just because you have that internally does not mean you're going to be treated that way by the outside world. So I see
It's
this as an
true.
opportunity to reflect on what I tell my younger self. And, I think a lot of that could
Yeah.
be summed up as, hey, look to Asia. Because those are the people that just kind of live there and do their thing. They don't have any weird racial hangups. They don't have any weird insecurities. They're just doing their thing. So that might be a good place to look.
Right. They don't have any weird hangups because of their race. I would say.
Exactly.
I mean,
You know,
everyone has weird hangups, believe me. Right?
absolutely.
But
Absolutely. And we'll be talking
it's
about
not
those
tied to
too.
their race. Yeah, and yeah, I agree. And I do work through an organization called, also known as, that's an adoptee organization that was started by and for Korean adoptees mainly, or almost exclusively. Maybe I think 30 years ago or so, maybe even longer.
Wow. Okay.
But has expanded to be more inclusive of other Asian adoptees from other Asian countries, and I think even non-Asian adoptees, right? Partly because I think we're just AKA is a more well known, right? Because it's older, more well known in the New York, New Jersey area.
Absolutely.
But we have a mentorship program, so a big part of the reason why I wanted to do that was, as you said, sort of being an adult Asian or Asian American adoptee presence in their lives, right? Because even in a city that's as diverse as and varied as New York City, and in New Jersey as well, there aren't. I don't think you're not really going to run into, or it's not very likely you're going to run into someone who's an adult Asian adoptee just being growing up as a kid, right? There aren't
Absolutely.
probably any that live in your neighborhood. And it's so part of the reason why I wanted to be a mentor was to do that, was to be that sort of example, right? Even even if all we do is basically do fun things, at least I'm physically in their lives, right?
Absolutely.
And I think this podcast obviously is one avenue to also do that. So I'm excited for that.
Definitely, because we're going to be able to say things that a lot of people could really use but haven't heard yet. I guess the example that I always go to is, I think the book that really blew my mind when I was like 21 or 22 was reading Malcolm X's autobiography and being like, damn, he said that? Damn, you're allowed to think that shit? And that's something that I want to encourage here too, is the idea that there are plenty of things that a lot of people commonly think but haven't even articulated or said publicly, because a lot of it covers taboo things, or it might be an opinion that goes against the grain. So I think that us having the conversation about these sorts of thoughts or opinions will allow for people to sort of allow themselves to think these things. So I'm excited to see what kinds of reflections that people can have as a result of us being comfortable talking about this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, talking to what you were saying about being uncomfortable, right? I think so many adoptees and myself included, right, growing up, or just even not too long ago as a fully grown adult, in their 30s, and now I'm entering my 40s. I wouldn't necessarily want to express these things, even to myself, some of these ideas about these negative feelings or critical thoughts about the adoption, the adoptee system, living as an adoptee, all these things, because I was worried about how my parents would feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
How white people would feel, basically. Yeah. And other, how just a lot of guilt, right? A lot of, I think guilt's probably the best word. So I'm hoping that, I'm working through that kind of stuff, just doing this too, right? Like, because as comfortable as I've gotten over the years, doing Plan A magazine and being on Escape from Plan A podcast, and the other things that I've been involved with, like Con, which is a adoptee conference, and things like that, I've gotten more comfortable with it. But I still have those moments, right, where I'm like, oh man, I don't want to say this because it's really going to upset people, or am I somehow betraying these, my parents, or people like my parents, right, who did a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
good thing in quotes.
Good thing in quotes. A good thing, quote unquote. And that, and that's probably something we'll talk about too, because I feel like you can make a case that it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, right? From some perspective, in a perspective that most adoptive white parents in America, right, when they're adopting internationally, they're not doing it with a nefarious thing in mind, right? They don't think, oh yeah, I'm going to this foreign land and I'm taking their kids so that I can, do something bad. They think that they're doing, it's obviously not that, right? They think they're doing something good.
If it were me,
yeah,
I would say probably about 1 in 4 probably think that way. They're not going to publicly express that, but that's going to be my wild ass guess for the number of people with nefarious intentions.
1 in 4 is a lot. Okay.
I've met some people that have been through some fucked up shit, but we'll be going through that.
Trust us. True. You know what? You're probably right. It's probably a lot more than I'm thinking. I'm giving too much benefit of the doubt here. But,
oh yeah, and that's another thing too, is that I think throughout this we should set the expectation now that you're going to be the nice one and I'm going to be the asshole. I mean, you're the one that's always more understanding, more assuming of people's good intentions, things like that, and like I admire that. But I have a certain level of cynicism that makes me think, oh fuck that shit.
Oh, for sure.
And fuck these people.
No, and yeah, so I'm relatively the nice one because believe me, I have man, we've talked about it.
Absolutely.
I've said it. So yeah, well, so we say quote unquote good thing because but even the people who have those like nefarious or more what I would say sort of nefarious or cynical reasons for doing the adoption, they still ultimately think that they're the good person.
Oh, absolutely.
They did a good deed because in the balance, being in America is better than staying in Korea or Japan or not a lot of Japanese get adopted to America, but or China, right?
I mean,
or
to these
Filipino
people, it's all the same place, same shit.
Yeah, it's all the same. Yeah. So yeah, it's always seen as good, and I think that's something that we also we're going to want to unpack, right? And to discuss is that it's not a good thing. Honestly, I feel like the creation of the international adoption system is actually sort of is a far net negative when it comes to human rights.
Absolutely.
Than a positive. It's just not a positive thing. Because it's basically a form of legalized human trafficking. Because it's all predicated on this idea of orphanage or being an orphan. And there is an incredible amount of evidence that orphan label is basically a lie in a huge percentage of cases. I'm not going to put a number on it because it's incredibly hard to peg one single number on that. But when you look at certain incidents, like the Brothers Home in Korea that came out, and all the evidence about how they basically snatch kids off the streets or fabricate paperwork, knowing full well that parents were alive. So the term orphan is manipulated for the uses of people who can make money off of children, right? And I'll try to put in some of these resources and books that I've read and listened to on like audiobooks that have done a lot of research into this. But this isn't also something that happens just in Asian countries. There are a lot of Caribbean countries this has happened. A lot of African countries this has happened. And there are a lot of these. Basically, it's like some organizations, a lot of them Christian, right, evangelical organizations will pick a country and where there's just almost no regulation, right? And they'll throw a lot of money at this country to say, look, we'll pay you, if you facilitate this stuff, these adoptions. And then suddenly certain government agencies in those countries will become like aware that this is happening, and they're like, oh, we got to stop this. So then once that starts to happen and it's harder and harder to just take kids from this country, those organizations, in America, will just move to another country, right? They'll find another country that has no regulation. So that suddenly it's the mission to go to this country and save those children, when the previous month it was the other country. So this has happened. This continues to happen. It's a cycle, right? And it's about profit because there's a ton of money in this. And
Absolutely.
it's we will get more specific on this, but we're sort of just talking about how.
Yeah, because actually,
you know,
what I can say is that, talking about adoption and talking high level about the flaws or the things that we don't like, I think that's going to be number one bullet on our list for things this stream and this podcast does not like. So that's going to be the first thing is adoption. Short version of the answer is, hey, it's just laundered child trafficking. And hey, maybe family preservation and monetary assistance to families rather than displacing and
Yes.
adopting children thousands of miles away in a place that may not welcome them is going to be a better approach. So I think, yeah, adoption, number one on the list of things we don't like. And we will elaborate on that in more
That's
than
right.
just a black or white sort of way as time goes on. But, at a high level, yeah, not good.
Yeah. It's so many flaws to the point where it's almost not worth it's not, well, not sort of, but it's not worth it, in my opinion, to try to fix the current system we have. We need a
Yeah.
whole new one.
Yeah.
And
then from there, we should decide if children should be moved anywhere or not.
Yes.
But at the very least, we got to stop the shit that's going on right now because it's not good, folks. We'll give you some history and we'll give you some details later. But, as we've both dug into this, the history is ugly. And, there's been plenty of things in our experience that have been ugly as well, regardless of how things have turned out in the end. And whether there's positive sorts of net results from that or not. So, yeah, I mean, we will definitely be covering that. So I guess talking about things we don't like, we have a couple more things, at least on this sort of introductory episode, where we want to set people's expectations and give people personal context. So one thing that I do not fucking like, especially going on Twitter and going on social media and getting my brain damaged every day, is
I quit Twitter, man. I'm a quitter.
No, that's probably good for you. To not be looking at that every day and to not be posting, probably a good thing. So whatever you're using it for right now and the amount that you're using is probably much better and much healthier than me. One thing that does give you major brain damage is internalized racism, especially when it comes to Asian people and the sorts of videos that go viral and the sorts of standard discourse that we see in places like subtle Asian traits on Facebook. Just fucking garbage. I mean, basically every Asian person on the internet is embarrassing and not the least bit aspirational to me. Like, I look at that shit and I'm like, that doesn't look like dignity to me. That is just embarrassing cringe shit, and I refuse to be associated with that. So I'm pointing it out there right now. Internalized racism and the sorts of just self-deprecating, dehumanizing shit that people do just to get a laugh or to ingratiate themselves with white people. Oh, by the way, one feature of our show is going to be the anti-white racism alarm, and it'll be like this. So anytime we play this, that's when anti-white racism has occurred, just so you guys know. And I think it's really important to not make excuses for saying shit like, I can't date other Asians. It feels like I'm dating my brother or sister. Fuck that shit. Yes, those people are clowns. And actually, that's the perfect phrase that I would use because I got a sound effect for it. That is clown shit.
Dude, the soundboard just is awesome. Anyway.
I mean, that's one of my big ones. On social media, on Twitter in particular, on TikTok in particular, it's fucking like 20-year-olds saying weirdo fucking self-hating shit that is very embarrassing. So we're calling it out right now. We denounce that shit. We do not like it. We will not be partaking in that ourselves. So just setting the record straight. Fuck that shit. And so there's a couple more, at least for things that I have listed. Another thing that I don't fucking like, and that we've kind of touched on a little bit in terms of how we want to approach things, is being real and being honest. And part of that is not only just sharing the W's, the wins in life, how great our lives are, the impressive things that we're doing, shit like that. I mean, social media tends to be a lot about that. Or
Yeah.
it's people that
Yeah.
are constantly being negative, being like, fucking everything sucks. My life is the worst. I go through the worst misfortune that human beings can deal with type shit.
But like every hour.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm just, I want to be able to just say, hey, we are going to talk about the good and the bad, and we're not going to inflate our credentials. We're not going to lie about our experiences. Because if there's
Yeah.
one thing I don't fucking like about people on the internet, is that sort of, maybe I'd call it an ironic detachment. Maybe I'd call it aloofness. Maybe I'd call it like a mindset of wanting to present yourself as cooler than you actually are. But
Yeah. Yeah. I think
I
it's
don't
just
like
being
that. I don't like that
fake.
liar shit. Like,
Yeah.
and I have a sound effect for liars too. So hi liars, fuck you.
I love it.
But yeah, I mean, we want to be real. We not only want to, talk about the things that we have complaints about, want to talk about successes too, but not inflate that to the point where like we want to impress anyone. We're just talking about who we are and what we do. And so the last thing that I thought of, and at least for me, I mean, we might think of other things that we hate as we're going along, but the other thing that I don't fucking like is know-it-alls. I don't like people that are pedants, the people that will listen to people's words or see a tweet or see a blog entry, misinterpret it in bad faith right from the beginning, just so they have something to pick at and criticize about. And it's something that's usually semantic or something that is very hyper focused on like the wording of something and
Hmm.
not focusing on the intention or the spirit of what's being said. So, I mean, we'll say what we know and we'll say what we don't know. And
Absolutely.
we'll try and focus on the things that we do know, and we'll try and stay in our lane, because if there's something I don't fucking like, it's people that try to present themselves as like knowing everything about everything when that's simply not possible. So when people act like that, I think they're fucking liars. So I don't like it.
uh, please let us know if you can actually hear the soundboard
Yeah,
effects.
let us know
We
in the
can hear
chat.
them, but chat, please let us know if you can hear them, because it would suck if we're reacting to the to the soundboard and you can't hear it.
You can't hear a damn thing.
But yeah, no, I can't disagree with any of those things that you just talked about, Kyle. I mean, um, yeah, just we're gonna admit when we don't know. Uh, at least that's something that I want to be doing, and we'll go and learn stuff too. I mean, we're both curious, and
Absolutely.
we're willing to go out and learn, and just as much as we hope to inform, right? We're hoping to learn as well. And thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Cool. Looks like they can hear it.
Perfect.
So that's awesome. So yeah, I mean, we've been going for like 30 minutes. I do think what would be fun is, and it is in the outline, but it's not just because it's in our outline.
Yeah.
But I think it would be fun to talk about maybe, I don't know how long, how long this goes, but maybe as you had here, the top 5 events or things that defined our lives.
And
So
I
it doesn't
guess,
have to just be 5. I know that you wrote 5 here, and maybe we both wrote down 5.
yeah,
But I wanted to do something like this because as much as like this live stream, I think will be about us discussing very serious things, all that, and giving our opinions on stuff. I did want to just, at least for this episode or this stream, just talk about ourselves so people can learn about us.
absolutely.
So Kyle, I think you could go first. And the first thing that you've had listed here, the things that sort of are important or define your life up to this point,
Yep.
is Eminem, which I found to be really fascinating.
So
Why you chose Eminem?
I should first set the expectation that like things that are obvious, things that we've already covered. So things like, obviously adoption has
Right.
affected me majorly. Obviously being Asian has affected me, having white parents, et cetera, et cetera. Like these
Yeah.
sorts of obvious things about us are not things that I included in like the top 5 events or things that define our lives or define who we are as people. But with that in mind, the way that I listed it on this outline was based on sort of like the order that things happen in my life.
Okay,
So
so from like youngest to oldest.
exactly.
Okay.
So Eminem was first, because when I think about when he became big in 1999 through 2000. I was about 9 to 11 years old during
Oh
that
boy.
period of time. And I think it's really hard to imagine sort of how squeaky clean discourse, TV shows, and sorts of people's sensibilities were back in the 80s during Reagan and going into the 90s, sort of sitcoms like Full House, things like that. When I think about those things in contrast to Eminem, I feel like Eminem was really the first musical act that became as big as he did that was that explicit. And it was actually good for me because as someone that grew up in like a working lower middle class sort of place in southeast Michigan, where
Mm,
Eminem is from, back when I was like 10 years old, I needed that. Like,
yeah.
I needed to be able to tell people, fuck you, I don't give a damn about a Grammy type shit because, like, you're like, I mean, obviously he's white, but I don't think Eminem can necessarily fit into like the rigid box of what we would consider to be like white media. Because when I think white media, I think sort of like squeaky clean stuff like Growing Pains or like
Leave it to
uh,
Beaver.
yeah, Leave It to Beaver, things like that. And you know, white media was not going to prepare me to face off against people that had aggression or sort of nefarious intentions toward me. So Eminem going out there and just saying "fuck you, fuck this, fuck that," I'll stab you in the neck and open up the door, etc., was really important for me to be able to sort of survive my younger childhood and socially make it to where I am today. Because, I mean, if you look at me, I'm not 200 pounds. I mean, right now I'm about 120, 5'8". So I'm not going to be whooping many people's asses.
Oh man.
But it really helped to have words, phrases, just a sort of tone and vibe available to me to be able to just fend that shit off. I mean, as a kid, like
Yeah,
you
man.
don't really know how cruel or how nice the world is. You sort of have to go out there and figure it out yourself. And I'm just glad that I was equipped to handle the sorts of negative things that were happening to me by being like, no, fuck that shit. I'm not fucking dealing with that shit. That shit sucks. And especially if you're growing up in a white suburban setting, like if you are not a white kid and you're not a kid that's sort of like a happy-go-lucky, positive, treating people with respect type kid, you're probably gonna get fucked with. Probably gonna get fucked with bad.
Mm,
So I'm just glad to have had that. So Eminem, I mean, other musical acts too, DMX, Limp Bizkit, but I think Eminem really sorts of defines that sort of like that first sort of act in music where I was like, damn, he's really just letting it rip. And I
yeah.
mean, today we take that for granted. But back in 1999, you didn't fucking have musical acts like that. Talking about, sorry, Puff, I don't give a fuck if this chick was my own mother. I'd still fuck her with no rubber. And I'd
Man, I
have a
was
new son
never
and
an
a brother at the
Eminem
same
fan, to be
time.
honest. But I grew up. I did. I grew up in a different type of neighborhood than you did, and it never really spoke to me. And I think
Yeah,
if I, if because I grew up in like a lily white suburb of, rich suburb of New York City, and we had plenty of people who loved Eminem, right, growing up, but
sure.
it was sort of like a poser thing, right? It's like, why would you like Eminem? What does he say that you can really
Yeah,
relate
that you
to,
could relate to.
right? Like, oh, fuck your parents, like that bought you a car and you live in this mansion, and like, oh, yay, you hate your parents because you're rich and they have expectations for you. Like, it just didn't,
I
it
can picture
doesn't
that.
seem, it's not the same, right? But I really get, I can understand where you're coming
Because
from for how you explain it, right?
I'm thinking
For you.
about like the types of kids that I grew up around, and like I sort of see it as like the definition of like the fucking spoiled kids. They aren't necessarily rich, but they're definitely spoiled and badly behaved, where they're sort of like, fuck you, mom, like that type of attitude. Like that's the kind
Uh-huh.
of people I had to deal with. So it's just
Oh
like
my God.
they were just gonna let shit rip to fuck me up just so they didn't have to be at the bottom of the hierarchy. So
Got it.
thankfully, I didn't have to be. I was just like perfectly right in the middle. You know, I wasn't super popular, but I also wasn't getting my ass whooped every day because I had like these resources to protect me.
And I feel like most people sort of live in that zone, right? Because
Yeah,
most people aren't cool, and most people aren't being, bullied every second, right? Most people grow up in that middle band where like
exactly.
maybe you're a little bit cool for something or in some crowd, but you're not like a cool kid. And then like, you're not just getting your, head pounded into the sand, every waking moment either. And it's and that's sort of like the place you want to be, right? You don't want to be necessarily super cool or uh, you know, being picked on all the time. And it's and most people are in that zone. So it's just like you're just normal. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think people just don't like seeming boring, I guess.
At
But
least in America.
yeah, at least in America.
Yeah,
But yeah, but what's also really interesting about why you say, or what Eminem did for you is that it sort of, at least what I hear is that it taught you to stand up for yourself, right?
absolutely.
And I think, that's fascinating because I don't know
So
if I've ever heard that said about why someone likes Eminem,
I don't
right?
know about you, but when you were a kid, did they ever have like guidance class and they like showed videotapes about like conflict resolution? And it was sort of just like go up to your bully and say, I don't like that. Let's discuss this and have a civil discussion about this bullying you're tormenting me
I'm
with.
a little bit older than you, so I definitely had guidance counselors, but we didn't
Okay.
have those stupid we didn't have any videos like that.
Yeah,
Maybe they would say things like that, but there was no like video I had to watch.
yeah,
And
I
I don't
think
think I
maybe just
ever
like the
did.
homophobic
Yeah.
bullying was so bad in the 80s that like they really said like, hey, we got to give these kids or at least present like productive strategies on how to deal with this shit. And you know, it doesn't fucking work, but at the
No.
very least they could present that as something hey, we put in some effort type shit. So, yeah.
Yeah. Dumb. Dumb. All right, cool. So then that was Eminem.
Yep.
And then the second thing you listed was the PlayStation 2. So as I said, I'm a little bit older, so I did list video games as well. I listed the Nintendo NES and the Sega Genesis because
Mhm.
that was sort of my first um that was like my initial thing. But like, so for you, the PlayStation 2.
Yeah, because I grew up with the NES, I grew up with the Sega Genesis, but I feel like PlayStation came out in 2000, and I was 10 at that time. And I feel like it was the first time that I was absolutely just fucking blown away by the technology. I'd never seen anything that looked that good before. And in 2001, a lot of great games came out, and I feel uh, like a
Yeah.
handful that I can think of for the PlayStation 2 that came out in 2001 that were absolutely huge, that are still influential today, and that sort of set me up for just like my interest in tech. And also just like I think a lot of people's tolerance of just like the kinds of wild shit that you hear now. Like perfect example is Grand Theft Auto 3. That came out when I was 11 years old and every fucking kid had it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like it's amazing to think about. Like I lived through that. It's sort of like the prime of my life as a kid, like experiencing that for the first time. I mean, like another one is Metal Gear Solid 2. I just love that series so much. And you know, just got to play the Metal Gear Solid alert sound. Um, and Final Fantasy X. I think those are the big
Yeah.
three that came out in 2001 and that sort of just represent the PlayStation 2 for me. Oh, and Devil May Cry too. I mean, just like these Japanese made games, or Grand Theft Auto open world type games, where like we had never seen anything like that before. And you know, I haven't really been impressed with tech ever since. I feel like it's been diminishing returns since then. But
Oh my
that
God,
was
I
really
agree
what
with
got
you.
me into technology. Was the PlayStation 2. So
Yeah, and it was not just video games, like you said, just technology, right?
yeah,
Just the idea that like this thing could produce this image, and not only could an image, but you can interact with it, right?
it's really
Um,
hard to imagine now that we're in 2022 and you know we've got like ray tracing graphics cards and shit like that, that having 3D graphics done in real time in the home was like absolutely unimaginable in like 1994. So to be able to experience something like the PlayStation 2 with like Tekken Tag Tournament like 5 years later was absolutely mind blowing. So I mean, it's just one of those things. You had to be there. That was really the first time I remember like people lining up for a console type shit, the kind of shit that we're used to seeing now.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's you had to have been there, and that sort of sets the tone for like what age I am. And hey, if you were born in 2000, I'm sorry, you're out of luck. You're not going to be able to experience the magic that we did if you're a little bit older. So that those
No,
days are gone.
it's funny. Like, I'm even older, right? So for me, my first video game experience was, the first Nintendo, right? So the
Yeah,
NES and the Sega equivalent, the Genesis, right? And I feel like video games, they might have peaked at the PlayStation 2. Maybe you could make a case for like PlayStation 3 because I think there were still some innovations that happened then. But from then, I think it really didn't get any better in terms of gameplay, instead of in terms of innovating storytelling, both from like a more scripted experience, linear experience, and also sort of this what they call emergent storytelling, right, where the the game has these systems and a world, and then events happen, but based on the player's actions, right, and that sort of creates each player's own story as they play through the game. I don't see that things like Fortnite and like Valorant or Overwatch, or even like, all the first person shooters that we have, all these like
yep.
AAA titles. I just don't think they've really innovated in terms of gameplay. Like, I don't think
The
Fortnite
interactions
really
haven't
gives.
gotten any deeper. They
Right.
haven't gotten any more complex.
Shadow of the Colossus, right? Got to be in top
Yeah,
3. Like that is that like Chris is saying, like that's the epitome of a game where the player sort of makes the story. And yes, there's
absolutely.
sort of like a very vague universe and lore within the game, but it doesn't really explain it to you, and you just got to go out and play it. And there are mechanics and things that you do, and like a thing you're supposed to be doing, killing the colossuses or whatever, but it really doesn't hold your hand at all. And I'm not like a huge fan of those types of games. I like more linear sort of story games, but I can understand the appeal for some people, right? Or a big swath of people, because there's really no other equivalent in any other media for that type of thing.
Absolutely
Movies
not.
don't do that, right? A movie is just there, you watch it. Certainly, there are ways that you can interpret it differently, and you can keep watching it and maybe pick up other subtleties, but it's not the same type of thing as playing a game like, Shadow of Colossus or Grand Theft Auto 5 or any of these types of things, right? Where you literally change the world that's there, right?
Yeah.
People who were born in 2000 and onwards
Yeah.
in the West have lived a life of diminishing returns in all aspects.
I think that is a
Yeah,
great segue into sort of like the last couple of points that I have before we move on to
sure.
your top 5 events or things. So I kind of put these together. I put 9/11 and I put the 2008 crash sort of together in terms of how much it fucked up our economy and fucked up our politics and fucked up our foreign policy and worldviews.
Did
Uh,
it fuck up your own personal life? Like, did you lose a
Thankfully,
job?
it
Did you
thankfully it didn't. Well, no, actually it did. Fuck that. Fuck that. It did. Like first of all, like after 9/11, people became a lot more comfortable with being racist. I mean, thank God I wasn't like
Yeah.
Arab or I wasn't brown or I wasn't Indian or anything that could be lumped into any of those that you could just assume, hey, this person's Muslim. But I mean, even then, it just emboldened racism to a greater extent because it brought a new consensus, I think, at that time of like, man, America was attacked. But on the flip side, like it just made us all more inhuman regarding just sort of like people overseas and just being uncritically supportive of war, being like, yo, we got to get these bad guys, these terrorists. And I think the war on terror and the sorts of things that were going on behind the scenes while people were distracted with that stuff, like, the
Yeah.
subprime mortgage crisis and things like that, that definitely affected me too, because, I was in college in 2008, but, even when I graduated by 2012, like, I couldn't fucking find a job. I went to a school that I thought was great, the University of Michigan. I kind of have mixed feelings about the University of Michigan now. Go blue,
The
I guess,
Wolverines.
maybe, whatever. But it took me over a year to find any job that was not just like food service or retail.
That's
My
crazy.
first job getting paid like, $16 an hour, or like $30,000 a year. It took me over a year, and that was in part because of just how fucking bad the economy and job market was
It
at that
still
time.
was. It
Yeah,
still was. Yeah.
yeah, that many years later. And I think those two events sort of started to awaken a little bit of like this dissenting sort of attitude I really have towards power and towards just like the narratives that we're told. And then I find out in my own individual experience were fucking lies, just
Well, yeah,
exaggerations
yeah.
and mistruths that, people just take for granted as like these are the things that sort of support my worldview, that I found to be completely untrue in my life.
Yeah, I
So
mean, we were lied into war, right? And that
exactly,
fucked
and
up
and we
everything.
haven't recovered since, from 9/11. Like, our brains are still fucked from that, and, we live with the effects of the mentality of the reaction to that to this day. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, like Chris said, there is, diminishing returns, after 2000 on that.
I think it was Alex.
Oh,
Alex.
it was Alex. My bad. Sorry, Mr. President. But anyways, um, one last thing I'll touch on before I start asking you about yours
Sure,
is
yeah.
number 5 for me was studying abroad. Um,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
studied abroad in Japan. I think overall, I'm going to set the expectation now. This is not going to be a pro Japan podcast. Um,
No.
but, me being interested in Japan is
But I don't hate
reflective of
Japan either.
the time that I grew up. In the sense that, like, fucking people didn't know where South Korea was in 1998. So when I think about just how much things have changed in regards to the Korean wave and K-pop and things like that. Like, that was Japan when I was growing up. And so that was the only socially acceptable way for me to engage being more Asian or being more in touch with Asian cultures or whatever, that, would appeal to
Yeah.
white people at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And s- that was my initial sort of gateway into going to Japan. But, being around Japanese people for an entire year, where, that's their society, being around people that were also studying abroad from different countries, that fucking blew my mind, because I think
Had that been your first time being, like, overseas?
so it was not my first time traveling overseas, but it was my
Okay.
first time spending quality time in a place that was
Or a
different than the
long time. I
United
mean, a year
States.
is a long time, yeah.
Yeah, and having to live in this society and having to reflect and think about what does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be conditioned in this country and then to live in another place and try and blend in there to the best of your ability? And, I think the number one thing that it taught me was like a lot of people in the United States love to fucking be show offs that try to be impressive, or
Yeah.
they try to
Yeah.
act like they're too cool for things like ironic detachment or just general cynicism or whatever. But, when I went to Japan and I met people from like Europe, South America, Africa, other places in Asia, I'm like, my God, like these people have interests in things that are genuine, that are earnest, and like they don't fucking act like what they're doing makes them cooler or more complex or more interesting in any way.
They're just
They
interested in it.
they're
They just
just
wanna do it.
doing what they
Yeah.
do. And I think it's because like a lot of places outside the United States have cultures where it's not about the spectacle of trying to impress people. That's not the ideal. The ideal is to just be like a good person that like has a family and is like a good citizen type shit. And that made a huge difference in like my ability to be kind with people, my
Mm,
ability to
mm.
not go into interactions feeling cynical. I mean, I think if I go to my average American workplace now as an adult, I feel that way. Like, oh shit, I gotta fucking deal with these people. But going overseas really made me more open-minded about the types of people that are out there. There are more types of guys than I had met up till that point, and it really made me a better person and a more open-minded person as a result. It raised my expectations. So, I mean,
Interesting.
in the time of incels, in the time of being black pilled, like it's very rare to find things that give you more hope as you get older,
Yeah.
and that was one of those things that did.
And
So
when was this? When did you study abroad?
it was the perfect time in the universe in my life. I was age 20 through 21. So
Wow.
going to a new country, going to Asia as an Asian person who had Asian friends but had never really lived in Asia before. And for the first time, I was being like sexually successful. Dude, best fucking time of my life. I'm never going to have this experience like that again, but that's okay. I got it out of the way when I was young.
Yeah.
And I encourage all young people to get that shit out of the way when they're young, because if you're fucking like 35 years old and you have these desires to do these things, you're probably going to be a fucking scumbag at age 35. So I'm glad to just have done my scumbag shit early so I can have these conversations as an adult in retrospect with a little bit more wisdom. So, I mean, those are my top 5 things. So, Eminem, PlayStation 2, 9/11, and the 2008 crash, and studying abroad. I mean, aside from like being adopted and being Asian, are the things
Yeah.
that I think
Well,
give people context for who I am or things that have really affected me. Um, but if I go to your stuff, I
sure.
mean, we
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about the NES and Sega Genesis.
Yeah.
Any
Nothing
additional
much more to
context with
add to
that?
that other than, yeah, Jess. Yeah. I mean, I agree there. I think that
It is a
there's a
perfect game.
strong case for that being the perfect game.
Although
Though
playing the
there are a
PlayStation
lot of
2 version
contenders, but
now, it's fucking
this
choppy. I mean, it's an amazing game, but like it was pushing boundaries.
there's a
So like,
yeah. But there's a
yeah, the frame
remaster.
rate
I
was
think you
like
can play it
10 on
on.
that
Yeah.
during the worst times.
But strong case can be made for that. Um,
And so what about, I mean, especially since you grew up in New York State, you were a
yeah.
little bit more connected with New York during 9/11.
Uh,
So with 9/11, do you
yeah.
have anything else or anything different than how it affected me?
Um, I'm about, I don't know, I'm what, like 8 or 9 years older than you, I think,
Something
something
like
like
that.
that.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's sort of like the defining event, I think, in my young adult life. A lot of people make this comparison to like the Kennedy assassination.
Hmm.
I find that very, I don't, not really, not, it doesn't really fit from a like impact perspective of like how it affected like U.S. policy,
Mhm.
or how, the way you know like the impact of that event. But I guess it's similar in that just people remember it because it affected people's lives. But I remember exactly where I was and all these things. Um, but I at the time I didn't really have much of a connection to the city itself because
Mhm.
I grew up close to the city, but I didn't spend a lot of time there. My dad grew up and was born and raised in the Bronx, but we didn't spend a lot of time in the city, so I didn't feel this sense that like I was attacked as a New Yorker specifically, right?
Okay.
Because I think a lot of people who obviously lived in Manhattan or in New York City, or maybe they had in the past and weren't living there before, or for whatever reason have like a connection personally to New York City, and then the attack was sort of like an attack on themselves, right?
Yeah.
I did not have that sense specifically as like a New Yorker because I just didn't have that connection to the city. Um, but yeah, I mean, it defined my life just like I think it defined everyone's lives in America and everything else that happened afterwards. Um, and the financial crash that affected my life too. I was working, I lost a job because of it.
Oh man,
I
yeah.
mean, I'm luckily enough, I don't think it really derailed my career much, because I had a few years under my belt in the corporate world, so it's not
Yeah.
like I was coming out of college and couldn't get a job like you were, which sort of like delays the start, which I think has a much larger impact. than if like you're a few years in and then maybe you have like, maybe 6 months or a year sort of gap there. It was very easy to explain, well, the crash happened, right? And also gave me an opportunity to go to Korea. So like,
Okay.
sort of piggybacking a little bit about studying, you said about studying abroad. Like I didn't study abroad, but I lived abroad and I worked abroad and I was in Korea. And yeah, I mean, it completely changed my perspective on sort of my place. It sounds grandiose, but like kind of about like my place in the world as like a person and my worth as a human being, because I think it can be I at least was feeling a very down, right? Very beaten down,
Yeah.
and wasn't valuing myself. I know that sounds very frou-frou, but like I just that was the truth, right? And then, going to Korea, I started getting a better sense of who I was, a better sense of
Mm.
myself, and that I didn't honestly, it didn't stay too long for me. The sense that like, because a lot of people will say that they go to Korea and then they're surrounded by like other Asian people, and it feels very weird to them. It didn't feel weird to me for very long. It just started. It felt very comfortable, like a natural thing to sort of slide into, um, even without the language skills that I still don't have, and
Mm.
I feel a lot of guilt for. But like even without that, I still felt very comfortable being there for some reason.
There is
Um,
something very liberating about being in a place where you just blend in anonymously and you're not like a representative of your entire race or group.
yeah, and I didn't feel like I needed to worry about a lot of the stuff I worried about in America.
Mm. Yep.
Um, it was in a sense, like there were some things that there were some interactions with Korean people where I was reminded that I wasn't raised in Korea,
Mhm.
but it was more related to my being American than anything else. It
Okay.
wasn't racial, it wasn't anything or anything like that. It was more just like, oh, we thought Americans were like this,
Mm.
or you grew up in America, you must know that. uh so it wasn't anything. So but that was like kind of refreshing in a sense, right? Because it's like it was a little bit more human rather than like your race, right? Which is very
Absolutely.
dehumanizing. And maybe to some Americans they'd find that dehumanizing to be what's the word I'm looking for, stereotype because they're American, but to me it was like it was different. um And yeah, I liked it, but I'm like, I'm American. I want to go back to America, so I came back, and and since I came back in like 2010, right? I've had a job, and so I haven't had a problem. But I know that for some people, the crash really affected their lives a lot, and I think I was lucky enough that it didn't really have too many lasting effects on me. And then I said, my first marriage and divorce, and my current marriage, right? Those were
Sure.
very big events in my life.
Now I kind of feel bad for not mentioning like my marriage, but I guess it's one of those things where I think I went through more changes when I was younger than I have over the last several. So I'm sorry to my wife for that. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that. Because
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
no, I didn't really have anything. I was just
Yeah. No, I think maybe like a lot of people, but for me, I entered my first marriage too quickly, and I had a lot of things going on in my mind, and I think what happens to me at least is I will internalize a lot of expectations, or I'll assume people's expectations of me that I need to then fulfill that they don't even have for me, right? I
mm,
sort of just make it up.
sure.
And one of
And
those things
does
is,
that usually mean that you sort of like think that people expect more out of you than they actually do, sort of thing?
yeah, they expect
Okay.
more out of me than they actually do, or they expect, or I assume they want me to do some things that they don't expect me to do, right? So those are two subtle different things, right? They're elevated expectations in sort of a general sense
Yeah.
of like the nature of who you are and what you're going to do, and then there's specific actions, right,
Mm,
that you might think that they want you to do. and
yep.
and, and on that line, I was around 30, and my dad was very sick, and I'm the first child, so I was like, I need to get married so that like my dad sees me get married.
Mm,
Uh, and that was just not what he cared about, right? It's not what my mom cares about, any of that, right? But for some reason, it was in my head that I needed to do this,
mm.
and it was a big mistake. And obviously, I got divorced very quickly, and then I've been married to my second wife, love my life, and we're incredibly happy. I
Life
think,
guys,
yeah,
as
we're
Chris
wife guys,
says.
wife guys. But it's really changed my life. I mean, completely for the better, and I just can't imagine. But I don't think I would have gotten to this step or this point, being a wife guy, right? If I hadn't had my first marriage, right, and made those
Mm.
mistakes. I wish I didn't have to, but sometimes it's just the way it goes. Uh, so yeah, maybe it's a little cliche as a wife guy to put my marriages as like a defining moment, but they were. I had to put them on there. And then the final thing, I think, from the final thing is just Plan A magazine, right?
Yeah.
So shout out to Jess and CS and anyone else on here that is part of that crowd that
Yeah,
are
basically
watching.
gonna be like our
So
entire audience for like our first several episodes.
yeah, I mean that's just it changed my life, and Teen, Chris, Jong, Philip, Q, um, Liza, uh, yeah, changed my life and um, pushed me to do things that I wouldn't have done before. Like and work with people and I wouldn't have met you, Kyle. I don't think.
No, that's true. I mean,
Yeah.
we met through Twitter, and it was because I'll keep this short, but basically, I had a former friendship with noted former Bloomberg columnist Noah Smith. Fuck
Fuck
him.
that guy.
Actually, one more thing, clown. Anyway, um, if it wasn't for his introduction to Plan A to me, I would never have gotten in contact with you guys. So
Yeah.
it's been a really impactful thing in terms of just finding new perspectives that I didn't think other people had. I knew other people had them, but I guess that there was like a group of people out there that looked at the world or looked at life the way that you guys do. So it's been positive for me too. Shit. So I
Yeah.
mean, being a part of it right at the ground floor, I can imagine that it had that much more impact. So that's
Yeah. I
just
appreciate it,
very
man.
cool.
Yeah, and the whole and I keep talking about this, and we'll continue to talk about this,
Hey,
but
we repeat stuff on this
yeah,
podcast.
is the adoptee citizenship stuff, and honestly, like, so I talk to as many people as I can about it, and through my mentorship, I meet adoptive parents as well as the adoptees that I mentor, and in a sense, I'm mentoring the whole family, right? The
Yeah.
mentorship program is for the whole family, and I just mentioned it because we had the first event and we were talking about, and it was sort of just a get to know you sort of event, because unfortunately, because of weather, we couldn't have like the picnics that we usually do, which is our usual sort of get to know yous. And I mentioned to one of the mothers about the whole issue, and it was completely new to her because
Mm.
because it's really an issue that has sort of been solved in a sense, is that no new adoptees really have that issue. It's only people who are older.
That is true. And I think that's a
Yeah.
great reason why we needed to sort of contextualize how old we are and sort of the world that we grew up in. Because, I've noticed it myself with mentoring or working with younger adoptees, is that they don't really have the same problems with awareness of culture or being connected with their home countries, especially when
Yeah.
it comes to Korea, given Korea's rise in soft power over the last 10 years or so.
Right.
So that's really something worth noting, is that like younger adoptees tend not to have nearly as many issues with this sorts of stuff as we do as older adults that didn't grow up on the internet.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, they don't have the same sort of or as intense usually
Yeah.
disconnection from the country of origin. There's a ton of, not that it didn't exist when we were growing up, but there's much more awareness, and I think the internet is really a key factor to this of culture camps and things. And also these culture camps have gotten so much better.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that is because there are people like us who
Yep.
have
Who run
grown
them
up
now?
and gotten older and are the counselors for these, right? And also there's a really good ecosystem of younger people, right, who are maybe, becoming college age, or maybe young college graduates who still participate, right? So like they've sort of lived their whole lives and they've been able to go through some of these camps, and then they become counselors, right? So that exists. So then there's less of an intense sort of, I think, disconnection. But certainly there's still a lot of personal, I think, connection issue, things that come up, right? Just from a personal perspective, like why was I adopted, right?
Mhm.
All of those things, right? And trying to go, going to Korea or going back to China or wherever they're adopted from, and there's also, I think, to me, a surprising awareness of sort of the systems that they're involved in, right? So it's not just a individual thing that happened to them. They're more aware of that it's a broader thing, right? It's a broader
Yeah.
phenomenon. It's a broader system. It's a broader, uh, 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 yeah. It exists in a broader context. So I'm when I was younger, my young 20s, mid 20s, I tried to become involved because the mentorship programs are old, right? They've been going on for a long time. And
Mhm.
I tried to become part of it. And I just wasn't really mature. And I was a really bad mentor and not very responsible. And so I feel very fortunate that I was able to, in the last, because I've been a mentor, I've been involved and been a mentor, I think probably the last 5 years or so. And I'm mature enough to sort of do it and be a good mentor, I think, and
Mm.
really commit to it. And I'm glad that I'm able to do that. And I really give a lot of credit to my wife and to Plan A, Plan A, and all these other things that sort of
Mm.
help me keep honest with myself, and to because I can be very lazy. So,
Hey, I can
you know what I
relate
mean?
completely. Absolutely.
But yeah, and then just Plan A pushed me to connect with people on the adopting citizenship thing. So we did the whole podcast series on that. I've traveled across the country to meet with people and to talk about this issue and to plan action, and there are people doing a lot more than I'm doing. There are people who have dedicated years of their lives, decades of their lives to advocate on Capitol Hill, meet with congressmen,
And it has been
senators,
decades.
and it
It
has
really
been
has been.
decades. And there are people who are doing, who are lawyers that are doing pro bono work, and I've done, I've given money where I can to help for the legal fees and for the all these things, because it's very expensive to file a lot of papers and such. But I don't think I would have even been involved with that without Plan A.
Wow.
So I give a lot of. I know obviously I'm the one who did it, but just the fact that I got this group of this group of people came together and we created this magazine, and then that really pushed me to do all that stuff. So it's really defined the last. It's so crazy to say, guys, but it's been 5 years or more. It's gonna be like 6 years,
Wow.
right?
Crazy.
So yeah, it's really defined. It's been one of the defining things of that time, and it's just going to get better. We're planning some big things, and I'm really looking forward to how we can do this.
Absolutely.
This thing, man, that we're doing, this raw thing that we're
Yeah.
doing.
Keeping it
Um,
uncut and raw.
so yeah, I mean, we need to put together a new banner for the YouTube channel. I know we have
One thing at a
the
time.
logo, but we need to make this a banner.
Sure.
Um, and I love the soundboard that we have. We're going to continue to add to that. I think each of us is
Absolutely.
going to try to get a green screen.
No, yep.
We're going to try to do the green screen so we can
Yeah,
do
so you're not seeing
some
my
stuff
resistance
there.
bands and stuff on the door. Yeah.
But you know what? Like, so I have a picture behind me, and maybe I'll just bring it closer. But
Yeah.
it's like upper hair. That's like my mom, my birth mom, and my step siblings. Maybe I'll bring that
Wow.
closer. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Forgive my shorts that I'm wearing, because
No,
one
it's okay.
second.
I'm not even wearing pants right now, so I'm not gonna get up. So
I'll bring this closer
your
here. I don't
shorts
know
look
if you.
nice, by the way.
Oh, thanks, man. So I don't know if you guys can see that. There we go.
Wow.
But so that's, yeah. I mean,
Very
I don't know
cool.
how old this picture is. It was pretty old. I think I got this when I was in high school. So this was 20 years ago or more.
Wow.
So it's one of those things that I think about a lot. Is just
Yeah.
that I have like step siblings out there, and learning that whole horrific Halloween stampede trample thing that happened.
Yeah.
I just think about that. I'm like, do I know someone? Did my family get hurt? And I don't know. And there's no way for me to know that.
Absolutely.
So it hits anything that happens in Korea, just it's closer to me than I think, anywhere else other than the United States. Right.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be open. It's sort of, it makes me really nervous to show this, but
Hey, you're keeping it real, man. This is
keeping it
real
real.
life. Your real family.
Yeah.
I mean, not that your adoptive family isn't also your real family, but you
Of
know what I mean.
course. Well, yeah, and maybe we'll that is a great topic. I'll have to remember to write that
We
down.
actually
But
haven't like done an outline about that topic yet, so we gotta
yeah,
write that up.
I think that we could do a whole stream just on that topic,
Absolutely.
because it is incredibly complex. It's something that's I feel like very unique to adoptees, not just international adoptees, but I think domestic adoptees, to anyone who's adopted. I think maybe children of like divorce who get step siblings maybe have a similar experience, but uh, it's not quite the same. So I think we'll try to talk through that. I think we'll try to talk through that sort of idea of having two families,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Um, and yeah, so yeah, so
I
I
think
don't
that
know.
about covers it. I mean, we went through the outline. We have
Yeah.
some tentative thoughts for things that we want to be talking about on our next streams. But that aside, I mean, I really don't have anything else except, hey, I'm just glad that there's more than 0 viewers on the stream right now. So I feel blessed. I feel
I am,
blessed.
man. I mean, look, we picked it like 10. 10's a lot. I mean, I'm like talking to 10 people. We have 7 right now. Thanks so much to everyone who is, participating in the chat. I'm hoping for, we'll occasionally do sort of like AMAs as well, or just segments of the streams where we answer people's questions or just respond to people's comments. Maybe we'll do a whole stream on Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah. And I'll
But
be better about actually
yeah.
like displaying comments and showing them on the stream, because you did all of that today,
No worries, man.
but it's too late now. So I'll have to start next time.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think we do have to create the Twitter handle,
We do.
or the Twitter thing for our channel or for our live stream. Even though, as I said, I'm a quitter. I don't use Twitter anymore.
It's okay.
But
I can take care of that.
yeah, maybe we probably need to start doing like Instagrams and TikToks or
Oh
something.
God.
But the good thing is, hopefully, we can take this recorded stream,
Yeah, and just cut
right,
it up. So
and
we
we
don't
can
need to do
start
anything
chopping it
extra.
up, and then posting it to some other social media. But we'll try to be good with that. Be patient. But yeah, we will share with everyone what this Twitter handle is. I don't think it's going to be that active, but we will post the links and the times for the live streams on there. I believe our tentative schedule for the streams is going to be every Tuesday, I think, around this time. So around 9 p.m. Eastern is when we'll do it. Yes, there are, and we will try to utilize them. Those tools. The reason why we chose today, November 1st, And this is something you probably should have done at the beginning. So for
Yeah.
those that are, just watching this after the fact, but the reason why we chose November 1st is because it's the first day of National Adoption Month or National Adoption Awareness Month.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there were actually two different things.
I thought they were the same
They're
thing.
two
but
different
I guess
events.
they're two different things. Yeah.
We both thought that they were the same, just different names for the same thing, but they are different things. We chose today and to do it for that, not because we particularly care about November being National Adoption Awareness or National Adoption Month, but we just thought it was as good a day as any.
Yep.
And yeah. So thanks so
I
much.
think that's all we got.
Thanks so much. That's it. So thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
And we will see you guys next time. Bye.
All right. Peace.